So I'm going to be talking a bit about today the issue around academic performance and progress and how that plays a role in evaluating schools' health overall. And it's really focused on the idea of, if you are a sitting board member, how you think about this process, knowing that you aren't in the school every single day. Many of you do not have education backgrounds, so you will have to sort of go and wade through a whole bunch of different ways of thinking about a school. And so what we are going to hope to get to is to narrow this down to a process through which you can think about what questions you might ask to get a better sense of where the school is to its goals. So our goals for today is, as a member of this development session, I really want you to be able to have spent some time to visualize an ideal school setting. And I think that's a good place to start, because it helps when you start to think about what you of all the million things that you want to think about in a school, what are some of those things you would want to think about. We'll then narrow them down to a group of indicators that help to evaluate a school's academic health. And to be quite honest, we're gonna really focus on this issue of academics. There are other aspects of measurement as well, but we're really gonna focus on that. And then to design the types of questions board members could ask in order to monitor student progress and overall academic health. And you have the agenda in your folder. I just want to walk us through real quickly. I'm going to talk a little bit about NSNO and our role and what we do, and really give you a chance to ask any questions or any thoughts on that. We will then spend some time thinking about the model school that is in your mind, so that you have that as a fresh indicator. We're going to then talk about all the different indicators that people have of what a great school would look like. Then we're going to start really narrowing it down to how do we think about that in terms of academics. We'll take a quick break. Then we'll come back and talk a little bit about how you as a board member or a potential board member might get information from a school or through your board membership that would help you to evaluate how a school is doing. And then we'll have a little role play. You all will play board members. I'm going to play a school leader, and you get to ask me questions, and then you get to define how on track you think this school is based on my answers. We'll have some wrap up and reflection at the end. Any questions on the goals for today? Okay, we've already done this, so we're going to keep going. Let's start out with talking a little bit about NSNO. I just want to put this out there so you know where I'm coming from and you know what our organization does and you have a sense of us. You have a folder that has a whole bunch of information. There's a whole bunch of information up here. I just want to talk a little bit about New Schools for New Orleans has been around essentially since the storm. And our role is predominantly to play three large roles within the city. One is a strategic leadership role. As we've had a diffusion of governance in the city and a diffusion of who runs which schools, there's still a need for not oversight, because we don't play that role, but someone and a group and an organization that is looking across the city, looking for ways to bring in additional funding, but also looking for ways to constantly stay focused on student achievement. We do this in a way where we do school development. We have in the past incubated new school leaders to start Fresh Start schools. Pride is an example. We also now predominantly work within the sphere of turnaround. So what we have done is we in partnership with the RSD, have a very large I-3 grant from the federal government, and we give money to organizations that meet certain criteria that then want to expand and take over the lowest performing, underperforming schools in the city and turn them around. So some examples of those would be Tubman or Clark, most recently John Mack 42, and other schools. So we play that role. We also bring in human capital providers that help to support our schools. These human capital providers would be groups like ANET, which have brought to our schools interim assessments. We also have match teacher coaching, which helps bring in additional resources to support teachers. Another group we just had started is Cantor Coaching, Leading Educators. These are all groups that run, and we help them with seed funding as they come to the city and help them support other schools. Predominantly, my role is that sort of that underneath the three areas. There's NSNO investment support. This is my work, which is predominantly once we have a school in our portfolio, what can we do to support that school? Some of the things we do are school reviews. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We run a math collaborative for middle leaders to help support middle leaders in supporting teachers. And we have a high school consortium where we're using common interim assessments across high schools. So we've had a considerable impact, both in terms of the amount of money we brought here and the number of schools we've incubated or helped to start, and where our human capital providers go to. So with that being said, I just want to point out where we're driving at now. How we think about our work now is to really provide what we call high quality seats. This means seats in schools with an SPS over 100, or at least over 100 in the old system. Now we'll talk a little bit about SPS in general, but these would be schools that would be on their way approaching C, B, and A. And so that's our focus in the next 10 years, to create 50,000 high-quality seats by helping to drive schools to excellence, and also to build and maintain an enduring organization. I just put this up here just so you have a sense of where we are in our own growth. A few years ago, our whole role was really just to figure out who needed what. Our role is still to do who needs what, but also to help support people in schools as that process goes along. So what does a school review process look like? One of the services we offer schools that is a school review. This is in other areas or domains, it's simply a quality review process. And what we do is, before the review, we ask the school leader to do a self-evaluation, to give us information about the school. What are their systems like? How are they operating? We survey every staff member across the school. And across, I think we're at 25 different questions that we survey them. On day one, I go to the school, I interview all members of the leadership team to find out some more information. On day two, we bring a group of leaders from across other schools, both school leaders as well as middle leaders, and staff members from NSNO to run a school review. And during that time, we observe every teacher teaching twice. We interview every teacher. We talk to students throughout the day. And the review team, our goal that day is to create a SWOT analysis. What are the strengths of the school as it stands? What are the weaknesses or areas of growth? What are the threats and the assets they have to throw against those threats? And what are potential solutions to those threats? Following that review, I write a review report that pulls all the data together. And I then have a reflection meeting with the principal. And at that time, I also I score our rubrics, which we'll talk through very quickly. I don't want to sort of get too bogged down in the rubrics, but I did want you to have them to be able to walk away. We score that school in the fall, and then when we do another review in the spring, so we're looking for growth across those rubrics. And then I create what I call a consolidation report at the end of the year that shows in each of the rubric rows where you scored in the fall and where you scored in the spring and what growth or lack thereof there was. So before we go on to that, let me just stop and say, are there any questions about NSNO, my role, what we do? I just wanted you to have this framing before we moved forward and thought more about this.
Are you providing this to all schools or just the schools you incubated?
That's a great question. So we do not provide this to all schools. We provide this to schools in our portfolio. So that would be schools that currently are in the I-3 turnaround process. Their flagship schools. So an example would be, we gave funding to Collegiate Academies, Sci Academy, to expand. So we do reviews of their two expansion schools and their flagship school of Sci, and that is during the grant period. Any other questions? Great. So let's do some work. I'm going to pass out some materials for you. I'd like you to take a couple minutes, and I want you to draw a picture. And I know this sounds sort of dorky, but I've done this several times, and I think it's very helpful and it works quite well. I want you to draw a picture of what you think an excellent school looks like. Most importantly, this is what in elementary school, you can tell I'm an elementary school teacher and principal. I will pull out crayons and paper as soon as I can get a chance. So what you really want to do is draw that picture. Doesn't matter what's in the picture. Doesn't matter your skills at drawing. But I want you to label it. It's a diagram, essentially. What are those key things that you think make up a great school? Don't be too specific to content area, whether it's science or math. If you think that a great science and math program is important, then make a little drawing of that. That's fine. And then we're going to report that out together, because I want to sort of talk through how people view excellent schools. So I'm going to pass out some materials right now, and then we're going to go through that process. This is really good. I have to say, as I reflect on this, both as a principal, how much I thought about all these things, and as a parent, how much I think about these things, these all make sense to me. There's not anything on this list that to me says, no, this is not important at all, right? So I just want to frame, I start this place to frame the next discussion, because schools are incredibly important and complex places. They aren't as simple as any individual aspect of schools, and to ignore all these things would be silly. That being said, I think we need to consider like how we as potential board members, or as we're interacting and thinking about schools, what our focus can be to ensure that the fundamental purpose of schools is to make kids smarter. And so all these things play a part in that, and you, as a board member, you will play some role in many of these things. I can think of, we have a standing board member here. I'm sure she can think of times when she dealt with faculty issues, probably at some level curricular issues. I'm sure leadership issues. I'm sure facility issues. I know all that stuff comes up, and you have to deal with it. You have to be prepared to deal with that. But what we're going to talk about today is sort of the vital outcome of schools is about making kids smarter. So obviously, we see there's tons of different approaches to school. There's some of different ways of approaching what is important and focusing on different parts. And these are all valid things that you're going to have to touch on. But the board has to be able to keep a pulse on student achievement, no matter what type of school it is, no matter what its focus is, no matter how it looks. The only thing I would say goes above academic outcomes is safety, because anything else doesn't count if kids aren't safe. And we all know that if you're a parent, I don't really care about anything else if my child isn't safe. So I'd say, that being said, we're going to really focus most of our time today on sort of the academic outcomes and how we are ensuring that our kids are getting smarter in a school, knowing that you're not there every day. There's lots of different instructional jargon that'll be flying around, and that there's also a sense that there are different things besides just test scores that we want to focus on. So what we're really going to do is, what I'd like you to do is, if inside your folders you will see a couple of different things. I want to sort of give you our rubrics that we think about at a school. They're pretty massive. They cover 3 very large areas: leadership, teaching and learning, and school culture. Most of the stuff we've talked about here is captured somewhere in there. Maybe not as specifically as you have, but they're somewhere in those rubrics. We don't use these rubrics as an evaluation. Remember, we're not an evaluative body. We're not here to judge whether the school is good or bad. We're here to help a school look at what they're doing well and what they can improve on and what that next level would look like. But I provide these for you just as a resource, and what I would just say is spend some time looking through them, look at the headings, look at what it looks like at each different level, and start to think about what these aspects of what you've talked about and where they're in there. But obviously we're going to focus really on some vital indicators for school success, and they're all within the academic realm. But I wanted to make sure you had those, because I don't want you, we're a values-driven organization. Our #1 value is student achievement first. That is our #1 value. We don't put anything above that. That being said, we know schools are holistic places, and we don't pretend that they aren't. So I wanted you to have all that information. It's also a tool for you to take away and just to start to think about how are all these different ways of looking at school. It's very complex, it's not easy, and we don't try and pretend that it's easy. Our 3 rubric rows that are probably the key rubric rows that you would want to think about as a school leader. And the first one is goal setting. Without goals, it is very difficult for you as a board member to know where your school is headed. Even a school as successful as Ben Franklin is, will have goals. Academic goals for sure. I know they'll have academic goals. They'll also have other goals too. There have to be financial goals no matter where you're at. Like, right? Don't run a school in the red. There are other goals around school environment. There are other goals that are fundraising goals. There are tons of goals, but you always have to have goals, so you have to know where you're at to those goals. And so we really feel like it's imperative that schools have academic goals. What are you driving to this year? And we see that as a true, like there's qualitative views of that as well, meaning like I would want to see these things going on in classrooms, I'd want to see these sort of things in hallways, I would want to see kid culture looking like this. But ultimately, there have to be academic goals, outcomes that we're looking to drive to. The next thing we have to know as we go along the way, if you look at the next row, we have to know, the next slide, we have to know where we are to those goals. In schools, we use what are called interim assessments in some method or way. You may remember them as quarterly assessments, you may remember them as exams, you may remember them as quizzes, you may remember them less so as grades. I would probably get away from using that quite as the indicator, but some measure as you go throughout the year about how students are doing. And we can do this anywhere from pre-K to 12th grade. Because we know if we have a goal, we know what the goal is. If it's an AP, we want to have all of our kids in AP who score a 3 or better, down to our kindergartners, so that every one of our entering kindergartners knows their alphabet. So we can have an assessment. It can be that simple and that straightforward, but we have to have a way of measuring that. So if we're in high school and we want to have everybody have an AP score, like take an AP class, get ready for college, we want them to have a score of 3. You don't want to wait until the end of the year when they're taking the test to say, guess we didn't get to that goal. You want to have measures, interims that help you understand where you're at. We know this particularly is true. There are lots of good examples of interim assessments as we go through the year. And we think about them every 6 to 10 weeks, depending on where schools will put in. But they're basically little dipstick checks. Where are you to your goals? How are your kids doing? And then the final aspect is, what are you doing? What happens when you're off track? Well, how are you using data? How are you using all the information you're getting in the school to know if you're on track to your goal or not? And I think I'm trying to, and you could push back if I'm wrong. I think in most fields, you're going to have something like this in most fields. Every business, every firm, everything I can think of, you're going to have a goal. What do you want to accomplish? You're going to have ways of knowing if you're on track to those goals or not. And you're going to have ways of thinking about, gosh, if I'm not going to get to my goal, what am I going to do differently? And this is what we're going to talk about today, how you as a potential board member could know that information and ask the right questions to get more information. I was trying to think over a break of a really good analogy. I'm not sure this is a helpful analogy, but I was trying to think of around these 3 vital indicators: goals, progress to your goals, and then course adjustment when you're not on track to your goals. And I was thinking, I was just saying that over Thanksgiving break, my wife and I are going to take our kids to Disney World. And it's the first time we've taken the children to Disney World. I haven't told them yet, so hopefully it'll be a fun surprise. And Disney World is a great place. Like, it's the premier place to go to. It's where everybody wants to go. It's where every child wants to go. In fact, my son was just saying, like, every child in his class has gone to Disney World. He's never been to Disney World, so it's like the ideal place, right? So we have a goal: get to Disney World, right? And so we're going to start driving, and I got a course laid out. I know how we're going to go. But suddenly I realize that we're at the Gulf Coast and I'm heading facing the water. Obviously I'm not on track, right? I've got to stop every once in a while and figure out if I'm on track, what to do if I'm not on track. If I'm facing the Gulf, I'm obviously not going to Disney World unless I'm flying there. So I've got to start making some decisions, and I got to start asking myself some questions. How did I get to this point? What do I need to do differently to get to the pathway to Disney World? So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do you as a potential board member know if your school's on track to getting to Disney World or not? And so we're going to just go through a couple of different ways of thinking about that. One of the most useful tools that I've used at my school, that we use in my job, that people use in many different jobs, is the idea of a dashboard. And a dashboard is simply something that contains information that is useful to you, that can be updated as time changes. And so we are going to talk through the usefulness of a dashboard that you might ask a school leader to provide for the board in an ongoing way, and how that could help you to know if your school is on track to getting to being a Disney World or not. So what I've done is, if you look in your folder, there's a staple group of dashboards. And the very first one is a very simple dashboard. I will tell you quite literally, this is the information that was given to me when I entered the principalship in my school. This and the keys to my school. So this is all the information I had going in as a principal. Hopefully most people have a little bit more nowadays. But I'd like you to take a look at dashboard 0. I call it dashboard 0 for a reason. But I want you to sort of just think for a second. You can jot down if you want. If you don't want to write down, that's fine. It doesn't matter to me. What does this information tell you against your vital indicators of having where your goal is, how on track you are to your goal, or what are you going to do if you're off track? And what aspects are missing? So take just a minute. You can either jot it down, or if you want to just think about it in your head, that's fine.
I don't understand the question.
Sure. So we have 3 vital indicators. The goal for the school. Yep, the goal for the school, where you are to those goals right now, and what are you going to do if you're not on track to those goals? And my question is, for just dashboard 0, what does it tell you about those vital indicators? You said it tells you nothing? Tell me more.
I need to say out loud, so. But, well, it says that students take 89%. So, while we know we have a good amount of students who are actually coming to school, I don't think we can really tell, as far as like student achievement, what they're really passionate.
People agree? Disagree? Senses?
I think it's a little, it's problematic.
Okay. Okay. So even if you think that there are kids coming to school, it doesn't really tell us, well, we don't even really know what our goal is, right? Do we know what the academic goal is? Do we know where we are to those academic goals? We do know that some kids are coming to school. We do know that there's still 11% of kids who are not coming to school regularly. So I'm assuming those kids are probably not on track, but we don't know. We don't know anything. So again, we start out with very simple information. And I'll tell you, student attendance is oftentimes what everybody hears very, very quickly. It's an easy one to capture every single day, easy one to add up. We have 93% attendance. Awesome. That's great. But where does that tell you as a board member where your school is to those 3 vital indicators? It just doesn't even have the information you need. Even if you had an attendance goal, which most schools should, you won't have all the information you need. So let's take a look at dashboard 1. Lot of stuff on dashboard 1. Take a look at dashboard 1, and I'm going to talk you through it just so you can take a look and say, what is this even I'm looking at? You have student attendance, and then you have a list of what's called IA data. And these are, remember those interim tests, those tests we talked about? And after the first 6 or 8 weeks, after the first quarter in high school, these are the number of kids who are passing, who got a passing score on that test.
You still don't have, I mean, they've only taken the first one, so it's probably the beginning of the year. But you don't have maybe where they ended up the year before, or what grade level it is, or what their goal was. So, I mean, they're pretty low percentages for passing. They're really low. But
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have where they came in, what they may have scored on A4 for the year before, and what was a good goal maybe for the beginning of that year.
So we're going to talk a lot of data here, but I think your initial assessment is about right. We have some information, but we're missing at least a goal. Like, we don't even know what we're heading for this year. Yes, sir.
You don't have, if I'm not mistaken, you don't have the grade levels. I guess, what type of school is it? Is it a private school? Is it a charter school? Is it a public school?
Let's assume you're on a charter public school. Okay. But that's a good question. Excellent question, though. Great.
You don't have the population of the students. So there's just those couple of factors.
Okay. Grade levels are, you're right. Like, is this a K-8? Is this a single? Does this have one grade? Right, and this is just all the data? Is this a high school? We just don't know. We don't know a lot. And I want you kind of like, as we increase this a little bit and get more information, I want you also to think about all the different things you still don't know about. And because that's going to really start to raise some questions as we think about how you operate as a board. So let's take a look at a dashboard 2 as we sort of move up a little bit more. Take a look at this now. You'll see there's been one addition. What's that one addition? What's the one new thing that we have on the dashboard? A goal, right. End of year goal, which is what? 75% of the kids will pass. Now you have to ask yourself, is that a good goal?
75% pass for each subject level or 20?
Great question. What other questions? Do you think that's a rigorous goal? Seems like a big leap from what? From the other data we're seeing here? Great, cool.
Also, passing over 60 isn't really doing great.
Right, my day that would have been a D, right?
Right,
Still,
it's
not an F, but a D,
you're not
right?
failing, but
Right.
you're not succeeding either.
Right.
I think 75% and like in the years of rigorous, I would say no. Rigorous would be 100%.
Mm-hmm.
75% needs to be an assessment at the third quarter.
Okay.